Alright guys, so let's see where we left off. First of all, before I start, I wanted to make sure I, thank you to staying with me this long or this far. There's still more to come, so just stick around, okay? It'll get better. Alright, so the last time that we, on the last video, we were basically up to the point where we had a component for the header already showing on the page, and the menu is also there, and then I also gave you some type of homework to make sure that the menu was sent as a prop, and so somewhere else, and then injected into the header. I told you I wasn't going to do that, but that was going to be sort of like a test thing for you, and then you can always go back to what I have right now. So I hope you did play around with it. It didn't have to work. It didn't have to. I just wanted you to get familiar with moving things around and putting things into props and things like that. So if it worked out, if it still showed on the screen, then that's great. But if it didn't show, it's no big deal, because that wasn't supposed to stick anyway. It wasn't supposed to be something that we were going to work out of. Okay. But what we're going to do is we're going to expand on this to make it a little bit more of an application or more of a website type of feel. So one of the things that we have to understand about a website is that website works on components basically, right? And well, actually I'm not gonna say components because that may confuse you later, because that's actually a word that we're going to be using a lot. But let's just talk about sections, not components, sections. So you have the header, which is this bar up here, and then this white space right here, which will be the body of the page itself, and then the footer, which will be down here, which we haven't built one for yet, and we might eventually. And then inside the footer, inside the body here, that's where all of the pages will be injected. Okay, so the whole point of a single page application framework is that when you navigate to another page, you don't want to reload all of these resources that you have already loaded, such as the header and the footer, for example, right, and the logo. All this stuff already loaded once, and you don't want to have to, when you go to the next page, have to upload all of that again from the browser, from the server onto the browser. And instead you just leave this where it is right here, leave the header, leave the footer, leave everything else that is going to be on every page, and just upload or update what's inside the body of the page for whatever the new page is going to bring. So that reduces the amount of load time. It makes it faster, it makes it a lot more effective, it makes it a lot simpler and a lot easier on the server as well, so it doesn't go kaboom when you have to make all these loads, all these calls. So for that matter, we have to learn how to compartmentalize our page a little bit more. Okay, so right now, if we look at the structure that we have right now, we have the components right here. Now what this folder really does for me, or what I like to use with this folder, is to make sure that I put there all of my reusable components. Now I get it, I know header is not really a reusable component. I'm not going to be using header a bunch of places, like it is what it is right now. So sorry, I probably should move this to a place called page parts or template parts or something like that. And in that template parts, I'm going to have components that I'm not going to be reusing more than once, but they are part of the layout of the page, because I do want to use the components folder for those reusable components that I'm going to be using a bunch of times. Like for example, a button. I'm going to be using a button everywhere, but they are all going to be named differently, and they're all going to be doing different things. So that's more of a component type. So we will do that later when we actually have more components, and then we will refactor, possibly in the next lesson. But for right now, let's just build on what we have right now. So what do we need to do first is we need to start creating at least the home page, right? Because right now we have the layout, we have the header, we have the body that is accepting some kind of content in it. So we're just gonna create the first one. So on the SRC folder right here on your source, on your very first root, you're gonna create a folder and you're gonna name it pages, and it's all gonna be lowercase. And then inside there is where we're gonna start putting pages. Now, I know it makes sense to say, okay, I'm just gonna add like the home page component right in there. Boom, that's it, right? Not really. You gotta remember that each page is most likely, it will most likely have a bunch of other internal components in there that they have to work with each other, or work with the parent, or work with another components outside of their own home page. So because each page is going to have several components, I like to also have a folder for that page, so that way when I need to look for something, I'm not going to have a whole lot of components inside of a big folder named pages, and then don't know which component goes with which page. So I like to group all of my components inside of the page name. So inside here, I'm going to add yet another folder, and this one is going to be called home. And then inside here, I'm also going to add, just to have it ahead of time, another folder, and I'm going to call it just about for now. I'm just in preparation of my about page. So now you see what I have here. I have an about folder, and I have a home folder. So I have, a couple of folders in here to work with. Now inside here, inside the home folder, this is where I get to put everything that has to be with my home page. And inside the about folder, I'm gonna put everything that has to go or has to do with the about page. So now you see why I do this. You see why I compartmentalize and components inside components inside components. Is so that I can keep myself organized, and if something is wrong with my home page and one of the components in it, I don't have to look for it inside the pages folder in a big list of components in it and big mess of files. I know it will be inside my home folder only, and that will be an easier way to find things. Alright, so now that we have the folder, now we have to create the actual component, right? The actual content. So I'm gonna add a new file, and when we do create a component, we also do we'll capitalize it. So I'm gonna call it home component. Let's just call it home. Yeah, call it home, and it's going to be a JavaScript file that I'm going to do this, and I'm going to rename it to JavaScript React. I don't know why that doesn't happen automatically, but whatever. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to at least put something on the screen just so I know it works. So RAF, this is why I turn it into a JavaScript file so I can have access to this stuff. And I want to pick this one, RAFCE. Now, I know what I'm doing here is probably spoiling you, because you may not have access to these shortcuts in the professional world, and it will probably make it a lot easier if you actually learn how to write all of this from scratch instead of having it just spit out like that by that plugin that I added. But because the more you write it, the more you memorize it and learn it. But for the sake of time, I'm using this. I think on your own personal time, when you're building more pages to this, try to not use that and try to actually write it out, so you can get used to the idea that of the syntax of importing something, of what a component is supposed to be inside of a constant variable. The syntax or the architecture or the anatomy of a fed arrow or function or arrow function, and understand that you have to return something inside the function, and then understanding that this have to have a div to hold it, but not necessarily. It could also be like that. This is called a fragment, okay, which is basically when it's like this. At the time that it renders on the browser, it's not going to add a wrapping div outside it. Sometimes I like to do this better. I like to render things without a div, so that way I don't add unnecessary divs. But for this purpose, we're just going to leave it as a div right now. This will just add an extra div to my things, but never mind. Alright, so now I'm going to put just something. So I'm just going to say something, okay? And I'm going to save it. So now I want this to display in here somewhere, right? So if I go to my app.js, which is the one that holds the entire application, I am going to put in here. First I got to import it. So import home, and it's already here, so I'm going to click on that, and and there it is, and I'm going to import home, and then I'm gonna self-close it because it has nothing else in it. I'm gonna save it, and as you can see, boom, there it is. Something is already displayed. Okay. Once we start adding routers and things like that, this home page right here will be basically injected in depending on what is being clicked here. So if I clicked link, this right here will be link. If I click, well, this wouldn't be about, let's say about, right? Let's say this is name about. If I click on about, this will bring in the about page, and if I click on home, this will bring in the home page. So we'll do that once we get to the routing part. But for right now, let's just hard code the page so it directly loads the home page on the only. Okay. So yeah, let's do that. All right. So let's go back to the home page. So it's a little to the edge here. I don't really like that too much. So let's go ahead and add. Remember, we use class names. Okay, class name instead of class. And then I'm going to add a container class, and the container class comes from Bootstrap, and it basically centers everything on the screen, and it gives you a little bit of padding on the side. And hit, there you go, and it's already centered. All right, so we have our main page already loaded onto the screen. So now it's time to start building a little bit more on the structure of the page itself. So one thing that every page has is it's going to be a page title, and then maybe some actions on the side, like some buttons or something like that, some, like, you know, an icon, anything like that. So that should be optional. However, that button should be optional, but we'll get to there. So so let's go ahead and build that. Let's go ahead and build our first reusable component. Now, remember what I said earlier. This right here, this component right here, this home component will be, everything in here will be basically just for my home page. It would not be reusable. So technically, whatever information is in my home page only belongs to the home page, right? So there's no need for it to be reusable. However, the page title, that will be reusable because it would say home in the home page, but it will say about in the about page, and it will say services in the services page, and contact us in the contact page. So it will be a component which I need to change the title of it a bunch of times. So that's how you know that it is a reusable component. And if it is a reusable component, you need to add it inside these components right here. Okay. So before we do that, since we now understand now what a reusable component is, and we know the header is not a reusable component, we're gonna now change this around a little bit. We're gonna go to the source folder and add another folder in there, and we're gonna call it parts, template parts, page parts. Yeah, page parts, site parts, parts. How about parts? I'm gonna call it parts. Now I'm going to move my header to parts. I don't know if this is something that comes directly from Visual Studio Code, but if it does, then you should have this as well. It says move, so yes, you want to move it, but if it doesn't, make sure that you do it yourself. So I click move, and I basically moved now my header to my parts. Now as you see, this is broken. Okay, so where was parts header? Where was header injected? It was injected here on my apps, right? So if you can see now, it says parts in there, so it is moved. That's what that other thing that you saw, that's, you know, the little window thing, that's what that was basically saying, that did you want to move it here as well, wherever it was referenced. The reason why it's breaking is because you can see this little dot here that is not saved. So as long as I save it, it should be fine. And there you go. And this is the great thing, one of the greatest things about React, that it can find itself anywhere. It's pretty easy. Alright, so now this is working fine, but now I have my components folder empty for my actual reusable component. While this part right here will hold the header, it will hold the footer, it will hold you know, basically website parts, containers, I guess, so whatever, right? Alright, so now in the components, we're gonna add our first reusable component that we're actually gonna use, and I'm gonna create a new file in there, and this one is gonna be called page title. Page title, yeah, page title, and JS. Make sure you capitalize it because that's the the construct, that's what we do for components. And now I'm going to use again my exporting React component, and it's already giving me the page title. Alright, so it's time to start building our first page title. So let's first make sure that it works. Alright, so here we're going to put page name and hit save, and now we're going to go to our home page, and in our home page we're going to make sure that we import it so we can use it. So import page title, and here it is, and then we're gonna copy that and we're gonna put it inside the container and self-close it. Okay, so now we're telling the home page to import this component that we just created right here, that we imported it, and this is where it lives. It lives in components page title, which is this one. And once we save, we should be able to see something that says page name right above something. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and save this, and there it is. So now we know the component is being injected into home page normally. I mean, it's working. So now we need to actually make it a reusable component, right? We need to first build it up a little bit. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an h1 tag for okay, so the reason why this is not working is because it's not turned into a JavaScript React file. There you go, h1. So we have an h1 tag, and then another thing I'm going to add is a button. I'm going to add an h1 tag and a button. The h1 tag is going to have my page title. Well, let's still call it page name. And the button is just going to say add for now. Alright, let's go ahead and do that. And look at this, page name and add. That's great, okay? So we're going to style this a little bit. First thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I add a couple of classes here. And these classes you don't have to memorize, but you will eventually become more familiar with them. So one of the things is going to be the Flexbox. Oops, something like this. Yep, the Flexbox, and then I want it to be align, items, center, and then I want it to justify content between. Alright, and I hit enter, and it does this. It basically, what I'm doing basically is I'm adding a display, a flex display to this component right here, and aligning the items in the center like this, so they're not shifted that way. And then I'm justifying the content between, meaning I'm flushing the first element to the left and flushing the other element to the right. Okay, so everything is working right. Alright, the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to use another class here, and let's look at Bootstrap and see what classes they use. So if we go to text, and we'll look for okay, so another way to do it is using here headings in typography. That's what it was, typography. So if we look at the typography and let's see what classes they use to make things a little bit better. There you go, display headings, class display one. So these are like, this is way too big right here, and I think I'll like maybe display 5. So I'm going to use this class display 5. So I'm going to copy that, get back to my work here, and I'm going to use display 5. And now for the button, I'm going to use a class name of button, which is basically just create an overall button, but in white. It just adds like the rounded edges and things like that, paddings. But I'm actually gonna add the color, and this one is gonna be my secondary color, which is this blue one that I already created. So button secondary. and then when I hit enter, now everything is displayed the way that I want it, right? So this is looking good so far, but this is still being hard coded in here, and that's not something I want to have. I don't want to have this hard coded in there like that, because then no matter what page I go to, it's always going to say page name. So for example, let's say I say here home. Okay, that's great, it's going to say home here. But now if I go to my about page, which I don't have one yet, and I use my page title component in there, just like I did here, right? If I bring this and I copy it and I go to my about page and I paste that, my about page is also going to say home. That's not reusable. Okay, we have to make it reusable. How do we do things reusable? With props. Okay, we talked about this before. So now is when we're going to start adding props to this. So the first prop that I want to use, we're going to destructure them, is what's going to be is maybe the page title, of course, right? So we're going to name this one title. Okay, so that's available to us. And then the next one that I'm going to use is going to be the name of the button. So we'll name that one button text. Okay, and we'll do that for now. So I'm gonna go ahead up here and click that, and then make sure that I use squiggly brackets, add that there, and then copy this and add that there. Bam. So I have now these props available for me to use at my component level. Okay, so if I hit save, I should have nothing. It's empty. Okay, now you notice this right here. Okay, because I haven't declared a button name, it's going to still have that little blue dot over there. Why is that? So let's inspect that. It's because it's still showing me a button regardless, but without a text in it. So it's still bringing in all the properties in there, including the size and all that stuff, right? This pattern right here, all of that stuff. That's what's making it that still shows up without a name. So there are a couple of things that we need to worry about here. What we need to do here is either we make sure that we do default props so that it never shows empty, even if I don't declare it in here. Even if I don't declare it here. What is in the option? Nothing. All right, let's close this because I don't want you to have. There you go. Let's just keep this here. And I usually like to have my parent and then my child here. So it goes like this: parent, child, grandchild, all the way down. All right. So anyway, back to this. So I want to make sure that I have a button, a props default, just so that I know that whenever I have whenever I don't declare something, at least I have something that to say there. So in this case, it's going to be header because it's the, no, it's not header, what the heck, page title. There you go. It's going to be page title because that's the name of the component. Page title, and then default props. Yep. And then for my default props, excuse me, for my default props, it's going to be the name of the prop, which in this one is going to be the button text, and it's going to be what is going to be what is the name that we're going to name it in case there wasn't any name assigned to it. Okay, let's just name it no name. Okay, so now you see it's going to have a no name. But if we go to the home page now, since the props are available to us, if we say button text and we say add, then now it's going to say add. Okay, now it's actually because it's defined, is overriding the defaulted one. So this defaulted one right here is basically not a really good thing to have. I mean, no name, what is that, right? That doesn't mean anything. I just wanted to show you something. Now, how could we do this a little bit better? It's like this. We're gonna add another prop, because remember, this button may or may not be used in every page. Not every page will have that button in there. But before we do that, let's first add one to title here, right? And actually, we don't need to have a default prop for that. Let's just keep that there. But let's do add it here. So the page title is going to have a title, and that one's going to be home. So bam, there you go. We got our, the way it should look. This is the way it should look right here, right? Now, back to this again, because I want to go a little bit further on this. We want to make sure that if there is no button text showing, so let's say, for example, what if a button text is not necessary? What if nobody declares it? Then you don't want to have this here that says no name. That's weird. Okay, that was just an example that I did. But you also don't want it to be like, come on, save. I need to save the component. What? Did I guess I need to refresh the page. There you go. So, but you also don't want it to just have that. That's kind of weird, right? So we have to have some kind of implementation in it for whenever a button is not really needed, to not even show anything and not show that weirdness thing there. Otherwise, it's forcing you to have a button with a name in it. So the first thing that we're going to do is we want to make sure that we watch for this button text property here, right? And basically, sorry, let me save here. Don't know what happened there. Sorry. All right, so we want to watch for that button text property, that if it's the button text, if the btn text property is present, and if it has any value in it, right, then we want it to show this. But if not, then we want it to hide. So at the component level right here, where the button text is being declared, with the property, right, for the prop for it is being declared, that's what we want to watch for. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create this kind of bracket here, the curly bracket here, and we're going to watch for the property that we want to set up for, and we're going to set up basically a ternary component here, a ternary function. So basically what we're saying here is, if button text equals true, meaning if it exists, right, if it's even there, then I'm going to move this here and put it there. And if it's not there, or if it's false or it doesn't exist, show me an empty fragment, which means nothing or null. You could do this, you could do that as well, but I'd rather show that. Okay, so now if we save this, you see that it goes away. Why? Because I didn't declare any type of button text. This is a lot better than putting some random message in a button, because buttons don't really have default messages, default names. So now let's see if it works. If I do add a name to the button text equals add, and I save, bam, there it is, add. So now it works. Now when it works. All right, so continuing on, what else do we want to do here? We want to make sure that this button text actually works, right? That it has a click, and that click can be used outside of its own component, but from the parent and stuff like that. So that's another thing we have to do. We have to add a property for the click. Oops. For the click event. So we're going to do that, and now in the button itself here, we're going to add another property called onClick. Now, what is onClick? Basically, onClick is an event. It's basically what you do to call an event on a button. In this case, it could be on click, it could be on double click, it could be on hover. So basically is what kind of event you want to use in order to make your, in order to communicate with your UI and have your UI do anything at all. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add this prop name in here so that we can access this event from outside this component. So now we're passing this event action into this click name here. We're going to save it, and we're going to go to a parent where we're using it now, and we're going to call it back there. So you basically say, oh, I see you saved an action for an event by the name of click. I want to call that so I can use it. And then I'm going to now assign some type of action to this click event. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a do click, or you can call it whatever you want, but let's call it do click for now. Okay, and I'm gonna hit enter. So now what happens now is that because it's a click event, anytime I click this is gonna happen. A do click is gonna happen. So a do click is gonna be a function. So what we're gonna do is, so we're gonna come over here outside of the return, and we're gonna create a function called do click. And this is going to be a function, and in this function all we're going to do basically is we're going to console log what we want to do. Alright, sorry, I was looking at the lesson plan. Alright, we're gonna console log. So what is console log? I've been clicked. Let's just put a message first before I start talking. I've been clicked. So what is a message? What is a console log? A console log is basically how I can log into this console right here, and you do this by right-clicking and inspecting, and you get to it. There it is. Now don't look at all these messages and errors here. This is because we haven't really done this, like fireproofed it. Okay, I'm just showing things as I go along. So I'm gonna go ahead and save that. Now, if this is working correctly, if I haven't forgotten anything, which I don't think I have, but if I haven't forgotten anything, I can come over here now and I should see a I've been clicked showing up here. Just click the console. And if I click on it, I don't get it. What happened? So, on click, listen to the function, which it should have. Oh, okay. So this is what happened. You see when it says here, the expected on click listener is to be a function, but instead it got a value of a string. This right here is a string. Okay. So this is how you make it a function. I'm sorry about that. So if I save now and I clear this out and I click here, there you go. I've been clicked. So this right here is how you assign a string property to something, a string value to a property, and this is how you assign a function value to a property. So by putting inside squarely brackets, I'm telling it to go and find a function named do click, and it's going to find it here and it's going to do whatever is inside that function. But if I have it in this, in the quotation marks, then it's basically saying display a string, not a function. There's nothing to execute, it's just to display. Okay, so we have it. So far we can show a button, give it a name, give your page title a name, and you can do different click actions. So now this is reusable. We can use this page title component in any page we want and just basically change the title, the name of the button, and whether we want to show it or not, and then have a click function also assigned to it. So that's how you do it. All right, so I'm gonna stop here because this has been pretty much pretty heavy on a lot of stuff, and you're probably gonna have need some time to go over this stuff that we did, and then we'll move on to the next step on the next lessons. So I'll see you in the next one.